my feelings about Frank are that he is an exemplar of human completeness. I think of the many dimensions of his life. The fact that he's not merely a founder of one of the greatest and most fascinating fields of science, SETI, a pioneer who starts in 1960 at a time when other scientists have tremendous suspicion and contempt for any scientist who would dare pursue a pathway to that most fascinating question. His scientific courage, his willingness to enter into a field of science that was kind of a form of career suicide at the time, and join with a handful of other intrepid searchers to first of all, to cut this cosmic question down to size with his brilliant equation, but then to pursue it. Frank is not just an astrophysicist. He is a searcher in the truest sense. I think of his work on the Jovian atmosphere, the atmosphere of Jupiter, at a time when astrophysicists had a kind of class perspective on planetary science. I think of his life as an artisan, as a craftsman, as someone who used his hands to make beautiful things, jewelry and stonework. I also think of him as a friend. Carl Sagan and Frank Drake really loved each other. And Frank's loyalty, his willingness to stand up for the people he cared about and the ideas that he cared about, make him, for me, one of those great occasions for human self-esteem. I think of Frank's Drake equation as a brilliant yardstick to quantify the possibilities of intelligent life. I think of imagining a time when no scientist, no reputable scientist was willing to venture into these places that, of course, are the most natural points of interest for all of us, scientists and non-scientists. You know, Frank, I'm in Ithaca, New York, where Frank spent his youth at Cornell University and then went on to a distinguished career in the Space Sciences Department, running the Arecibo telescope, which became iconic for the birth of the kinds of searching that scientists in many fields are now engaged in. But it took a Frank to make that okay. I also think of the times that I've shared the stage with him, how beautifully he speaks. His humility is another aspect. Here's a person who really could have made it into the Hall of Fame for any one of a number of his talents and interests, and yet he always speaks with a kind of dignity and humility that's so impressive. If you think of how people can spend 90 years and what they can do with their time, I can think of very few people who have managed to accomplish as much as he has, and yet to be so graceful about these accomplishments. Then I also think of Frank as a husband and father. His relationship with Amal and his love and pride in his daughters and their love for him. You know, there's a myth in our culture that if you really know a great deal about nature, about science, if you partake of the fruit of the tree of knowledge, then you can't be a successful human being at the very same time. And yet Frank is all of that. So I'm celebrating Frank's birthday because of the hope that it gives me for all of us, that we can spend this precious moment, a tiny, tiny wink of the eye in cosmic time, as fruitfully and as generously as Frank has.